the federal police of Germany. And inevitably someone complains about how small the refrigerators are. We didn't really have any other choice than to just roll the dice and see what happens at Munich. The job description, for some reason, of my job, I don't know, they thought they were gonna look at the job description and decide if I could get in. Not ideal. One of the most common things that people will ask you when you move abroad is, what are you doing here? It's a very easy starter question because people want to know what you're doing in the country, what brings you here. But in a year like 2020 and now 2021, an even more common question is, how did you get here? Because as we all know, things have gotten a little complicated. Hence the whiskey. We'll get to that. First, I just want to start by giving you guys some context as to where I was and what I was doing when this whole journey to get to Germany started. Because 1 year ago this week was when I actually had my first interview for the job that would eventually take me here to Germany. Now, I'm not the only person in this story. There's actually really three main characters, I think. Myself, my wife Amber, who you've seen in other videos, and then my dog Fergus. He's more of like a supporting role though. He didn't help a lot. But the story starts with me, Amber, and Fergus living in Chicago. Or rather, I should say it starts with us leaving Chicago to go stay in the suburbs because we were scared at the beginning of the pandemic. So really, the story actually starts in Highland Park, a northern suburb of Chicago. It just felt like a smarter idea than being in the middle of a city during a global pandemic that nobody was ready for or understood. And as you can imagine, there wasn't a whole lot going on. Not much to do. Which brings us actually to our fourth main character of this journey, who you might be familiar with. That is right, when you're jammed in the suburbs, nothing to do, nobody around, everything's closed, what else do you do besides flip on HGTV and watch some good old-fashioned House Hunters International? Now, if you're not familiar, which you might not be, we actually learned when we moved here that a lot of people in Germany, I think in Europe, aren't familiar with House Hunters International. It's where they take the blandest people in the world and watch them find an apartment in a different country. Maybe I'm being harsh, but lots of wet towels on that show, I gotta tell you. The show has like it follows a formula. You know exactly what's gonna happen almost every time, but that's not really even the point. You're not really there for the people that are on the show. You're there to sit with someone else, watch the show, and react to the apartments you see and say, oh, I couldn't live there. Oh, I'd love to live in that country. That's the fun part. That's why you watch that show. And inevitably someone complains about how small the refrigerators are. That always happens. None of that's really the point. The point is, it's the perfect pandemic show because you get to feel like you're out there seeing the world even though you're glued to your couch and you can't go anywhere. And what it did was awaken something in us. That sounds weird. What it did was re-inspire us to look into something that we've always talked about doing, which is moving abroad. It seems weird to think about doing that during a pandemic, but also, it seems pretty fitting. When the whole world starts changing super rapidly, you start to realize how many things you haven't done that you always said you wanted to do. And you start to realize you might not get another chance to do those things. I'll skip a lot of other little things. There's probably a whole video about just why we moved abroad that can go deeper into all that, but basically what happened next was us just scouring LinkedIn and Indeed and all these different job sites and just throwing applications out there. Things that sounded interesting to us, that were in interesting places, just start sending applications, see what we get. But like I said, it's a year ago this week that I officially started interviewing for the job that brought me here. All in all, it was like 2 months from the start of the interview process to us officially deciding we're doing it. We're moving. And that's what brought us here to Dusseldorf, Germany. Yeah, so now we're digging into this because now is when things officially start to get a little bit dicey. So I accept the job in June, and then my start date is at the end of August. So what I want to do is take you through a very quick checklist, just a couple of things that we went through over the next month and a half before finally arriving here. Because at a lot of points, we really did not think that we were going to arrive here. So first things first, we bought a flight. That flight got canceled for reasons. And then the whole time we had planned like, oh, I'm gonna go over there, I'm gonna start my job, and then Amber's gonna work remotely, and maybe she'll find a new job, but maybe she'll just work remotely because it's the pandemic. Everybody can work remotely. Can't do that. Can't do that. Now, there's things called taxes, and Germany does not like people who work remotely for companies that are not in Germany. Essentially, all on the same day, we find out Amber has to quit her job. Not ideal. We also found out, which later turned out to not be true, but we thought that Amber would have to learn German in order to get her visa. Turns out not to be true, but at the time, big stressor. And then out of nowhere, and I cannot make this up, I got promoted at the job I had in the United States, and I had to quit the same day. Then we start calling people, trying to figure out, are we gonna be able to get into the country? And at this point it starts to feel like maybe we didn't think this through. Which sucks because we're people who think things through. We think stuff through all the time. And the fact that we were running into all these roadblocks was really starting to mess with us. We called the German consulate in Chicago. They can't do anything for us. They don't tell us anything helpful. We called the German consulate in Washington, D.C. And they decide to tell us, sorry, we can't help you get into the country. We don't make that decision. You have to call the Bundespolizei. We'll get to who those people are. You have to call the Bundespolizei at the airport in which you're arriving in Germany, and they'll decide whether or not you can get in or not. We're like, okay, that sounds fun. The Bunder what? The Bundi who? We'll call them. We'll see what's going on. The Bundespolizei are like the federal police of Germany. They're basically like the TSA mixed with like the FBI, I think. I don't know. Point is, I have to like get on the phone with them, and then they never answer the phone, and I'm sitting on hold, racking up all these long distance charges. So then we start emailing them. I'm emailing the Bundespolizei at all these different airports. I'm like sending out like 4 emails a day just to see if we can get in. Berlin airport gets back to me, no dice. Frankfurt, no thank you, can't come in. Düsseldorf, no direct connections, sorry, gotta go somewhere else. And then, against all odds, Munich, by a considerable margin, probably the most conservative place in Germany, they say we can get in. Except they say that I can get in. And they say that they'll decide if my wife can get in with me when we show up. But they also, something very helpful they did, was they told me a lot of the things that they needed at the border to prove that I could get into the country. Hold on, I'm gonna go get those. This is a fireproof bag. You know what bag to look for if you want to steal our identities. Each of these has a gajillion papers in it. In here are things like our marriage license, a visa application, an employment contract, employment confirmation letter that I got from my employer to prove that I am indeed going to start a job in the country, a rental contract because we had to have a rental figured out before we even arrived here to prove that we were going to stay longer than like 10 days. The job description, for some reason, of my job, I don't know, they thought they were going to look at the job description and decide if I could get in. My college diploma, a pre-approval for a visa from the German, Arbeit, the German Employment Agency. Copies of my passport, copies of Amber's passport, our marriage certificate, like I said, my birth certificate, and then just a bunch of random other things in here that they said that we needed to get into the country. We each had our own copies because we were freaking out. But at this point, we're all in. We don't have a choice. We just have to do all this stuff. We already subleased our apartment in Chicago. We already took everything out of our apartment and put it on a boat and sent it over to Europe. So we didn't really have any other choice than to just roll the dice and see what happens in Munich. After all this, we get to the airport, we kiss our moms goodbye, and we just cross our fingers and hope that in 12 hours, will officially have entered Germany. The first month of us being here felt like a vacation. It felt like the pandemic didn't exist. It felt like there was this new, reinvigorated feeling in our lives. It was great. But it didn't last long. We got here at the end of August, and then at the end of October, Germany started its first series of lockdowns that are still going on to this day, to the time of recording this video, and frankly, it's only gotten worse here. I think no matter when we would have moved, we would have gone through a tough transition period where things start to settle down after the initial excitement of arriving somewhere, and then you start to have to get used to everyday life. But everyday life hasn't really even been everyday life. We've tried to make the best of it. We've tried to do a lot of different things. I mean, all the videos I'm making are probably just a way to try and feel like we're getting something out of this, like we're getting what we wanted out of moving abroad. And I still have hope that we will. I'm still excited and positive about what's gonna come next, but we just don't know. It's really out of our control. If we're scraping every last bit of positivity out of this, I would have to say that because we haven't gotten a chance to do all the things that we really hoped we would when we thought the pandemic would be over by now, it just means that there's more and more to do when we finally do get to go out there and explore. At least that's what I keep telling myself. Until then, I'll pour a couple more of these, we'll hunker down, and eventually we will emerge. Maybe. I hope so. My hope is that years down the line we'll tell our kids about this and they'll just say, wow, it all worked out. But I don't know, who knows? I don't know.
Think I might be over my troubles since you came around.
If you like this video and you're interested in following my story going forward, please subscribe. That'd be great, because when you subscribe, it makes me feel like people want to see these more, and then I'll just keep making more. Right now, everything that I'm doing is a little bit about Germany because, yeah, where else am I gonna go? But I want to do lots of different stuff on here when the opportunities arise. So if you want to see all that when it happens, subscribe and stick around.
You saw right through it all. Oh, I could not fake it, no matter how I tried. Ooh, you cured my aching heart when you came around. I saw million signs. I must be over it by now. There's a reason why. I think I might be over my troubles